Live from Citi Field, this is the Pro Baseball Central podcast, and this is Joe McDonald, and I'm joined with New York Sports Day's executive editor, Andy Esposito, as we talk about the Brodie Van Wagenen press conference, which ended about 15, 20 minutes ago. And he said they're all the right things, and he looks like he's out of central casting, and the Mets have a new GM, Andy.
Well, obviously, in saying the right things, everyone was asking him what is he going to do about contracts and the organizations, and it looks like he's going to be taking in information from every angle. And like any new hire, you're going to say all the proper things on day one. But I was very curious, and obviously one of the first questions was related to what are you going to do about the contract for Jacob deGrom? And, of course, both Jeff Wilpon and Brodie Van Wagenen deferred the concept, and that even though this past summer Brodie was telling the Mets organization essentially sign him or trade him, which obviously the Mets did not, but now on the other side of the fence he said, he said, quote, we'd like to keep him for a very long time. And that was the only way he would address the contract situation.
Well, I'm sure he's going to do that. He has that general manager speak now. So everything that's coming out of his mouth, it's coming out of both sides of their mouths. And this is the way it is with GMs. They're not going to directly tell you. I mean, I asked him about, are they going to spend on the high end? Manny Machado, Bryce Harper. And he says they're going to be looking at every single free agent. Now, could they afford every single free agent that they would like? They would like to put together a team. And as we saw with the Red Sox winning the World Series, the Red Sox weren't built on all-stars. The Red Sox were built kind of as a team, kind of different pieces in the lineup. So maybe this is the way he's going to be looking at it and doing the Red Sox formula of getting guys in the lineup who can move runners along instead of just going for the home run like the Yankees did this past year. So it's going to be interesting to see the next couple of months of what's going to happen with his with any of these ideas. But they are going to look to contend next year, and he does want to put a winning team on the field next year.
Well, what even Jeff said was that none of the by the way, he started with, in case anyone didn't hear, he started with as many as 40 different candidates that I think they wrote down on some kind of list, narrowed it down to about a dozen, and then brought about, was it a full dozen that he brought in for an interview?
I think a few of them turned them down, like Mike Chernoff and the ones have turned them down.
So of the ones that he did bring in for an interview, and he said they had like 2-hour interviews, he knew right away after talking to Brodie, they had a breakfast shortly after the season, and he knew right away that this was a very strong candidate.
Well, this is also a guy they had a relationship with. Yes. That's something else. If you look at the other candidates, they had older guys who had relationships, but they are going to be, if they're going to be a GM, they're going to be a GM in a short term. That would be Gary LaRocque and Doug Melvin. Then you had a guy like Chaim Bloom who would be coming in. He is highly regarded, but that would probably be an ultimate teardown too, because he's going to be tearing apart a lot of the parts of the team to put it in his image, because he's a very analytical type of guy. So this is probably the path of least resistance in terms of building a team for next year, even though it was the path of most resistance when it came to hiring him.
Brodie didn't even narrow down his philosophy as opposed to being an analytic guy or a scouting development guy, so it sounds like he's going to address all avenues to improve the team. Obviously, pitching is going to be the strength of the team no matter what, and yes, he'll look to fill in with some of the other players, but he was even talking about how several players like Jason Vargas and Cespedes and Todd Frazier and Jay Bruce are already signed to multiple-year contracts, so those parts are already locked in. And it'll be interesting to see what he plans on doing with the pitching staff.
Yes, it would be very interesting to see what happens when they do for the pitching staff. They're probably going to keep their current guys on the roster. Current guys on the roster. The question is, some of this money that's dead money, like a Jason Vargas, will he eat money to move them? Will he eat money to move, say, a Todd Frazier next year or a Jay Bruce if it doesn't fit into their whole analytical foreplay? To me, Jay Bruce is a guy who has no position to play if you're going to be playing Brandon Nimmo.
Well, historically, we know that the Mets do not go after the big-ticket free agents. So it is very unlikely that they're going to sign a Manny Machado or a Bryce Harper. But they probably will take a look. He said he's going to look at every free agent, but then again, every general manager in every baseball team says they're going to look at every free agent. Probably even the Marlins and the Tampa Bay Rays said they're going to look at every free agent. So that's not a surprise. But it's very unlikely they go for the big tickets, and will probably do almost like what the Boston Red Sox did this year with bringing in like a Steve Pearce or a Brock Holt or something like that to get those kind of players that are good fringe players that fit the bill for the entire roster.
And they made the big move with J.D. Martinez, but understand he signed later in the year when the price came down on him. So their big move happened because there was the bear market in terms of free agency. And maybe that's what he's seeing. Maybe that was one of the reasons why he decided to go over to the other side. Is he saw the top of the free agent market. Now it's coming back down. Maybe he's seeing that this is not as lucrative of a job as he used to have.
Well, that was a curious question. Obviously, being an agent and being a co-head of the baseball department at CAA, you'd like to think that he made a very good salary, and it's very likely that he's taking a cut in pay to be the general manager of the New York Mets. But he said finances were not part of the equation, that he's looking at it as a challenge. It sounded to me like when he even started out his press conference and he acknowledged Sandy Alderson, the former Mets general manager, quite eagerly, and that it sounds like he looked up to the general manager position for many years and wanted to take his shot at doing the same kind of thing at building a team.
Now it's going to be quite interesting with the general managers meetings start next week, how he's going to react to the other GMs now that they're kind of his rivals instead of his clients, essentially. That he would be sitting there before, he would go to the 29 other GMs and say, I got this guy, let's see, I think it's a good fit for you, and they go back and forth. Now he's going to be like, well, we want this player or this player, and we'll give you this player or this player. So, and it's going to also be interesting to see how he evaluates certain players maybe on the Mets organization or coming in that were CAA clients.
I'm going to say right now that having those previous relationships will be a bonus, will be an added benefit, because like any industry, the strength of your business is built on relationships. So the fact that he is already on, we'll say, very close terms with the other general managers, he has very close relationships with many ball players, so that probably even some of the likely free agents or friends of the free agents. So I would like to say that he's going in with perhaps a slight advantage, that he has the ability that what he already knows about the other general managers, what he already knows about the other free agents, is that will give him some sort of relationship background to begin conversations.
What we're going to probably see, now looking ahead, he's going to have to rebuild the whole bullpen. Mm-hmm. He's going to have to probably bring in a catcher, possibly another outfielder, a center fielder type of player. So it's there's some building to do here, and especially on the bullpen end, because that was the real weakness of the Mets team last year.
Well, obviously, every year, every team changes their roster. So, we already know what the weaknesses or the needs are of the team, starting with the bullpen. And like you said, they already will have a relatively set outfield. But is it a good outfield that can compete with the Dodgers and the Red Sox and the Astros and some of those? No, that remains to be seen. So I'm sure he'll be taking a look at some of the free agents and trade possibilities there as well.
And is it the belief of him, if he goes on the analytical end, having a guy like Jay Bruce at first base is a liability? He's not the greatest defensive first baseman. He hasn't played there. And, the analytics guys take offense and defense together. So will he do some buyouts and maybe some tough cuts over the next couple of months too?
Possibly, but, interestingly, the recent World Series kind of proved that analytics sometimes is not your best friend, and that the Dodgers probably lost the World Series based on analytics, not due to the ball players' abilities.
Well, it's a 16-inning game, and I stayed up for it. I don't know if you stayed up for all of it. Yeah. The extra innings, it was all these guys just taking swings, trying to go for home runs.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, well, that's a trend in baseball throughout. It's everybody's uppercutting the ball with the velocity, exit velocity, and they're all trying to hit home runs. So they're only trying to do that. But you notice, I think that Dodgers manager Dave Roberts kind of shot himself in the foot by sticking to some of those analytics. As to, like, he should have kept hot hands in the lineup every day, based on didn't matter who would be pitching.
Well, that's true. He should have done that. I mean, the first game of the World Series, he had some of his best hitters on the bench, and was playing Brian Dozier, who couldn't hit a lick in the World Series. So I guess that was the advantage of having two left-handed starters. It kept a lot of his bats on the bench.
Yeah, so what did that teach you about analytics?
Oh, well, I've never been a big fan of analytics to begin with, so it's going to be interesting to see how Brodie Van Wagenen builds a Mets team over the next couple of months, and maybe we'll be seeing more of this, more action coming out of Citi Field and more press conferences coming out of Citi Field as the off season progresses. The next big date probably will be November 14th for the Mets, because that's going to be the announcement of their Cy Young Award.
Yes, so that's why we were even asking, isn't it a priority to talk to Jacob deGrom about extending a contract at this time before he wins the award?
No, that's already spilt milk in my book. That's already said and done. They already know it. He wins the Cy Young Award, loses the Cy Young Award. You can't take away that season. They already blew it. They were going to extend Jacob deGrom. It would be last year would have been the time to do it. Not right now. You're paying top dollar now.
Yes.
The only way you get a discount on that to extend him is to say, okay, well, he's going to be 32 years old as a free agent, so therefore we're going to be giving him a little bit more money than he may get as a 32-year-old free agent over the next 2 years. And if they don't do that, and they decide to buy out instead of buying out his essentially buying out his arbitration years, and they don't do that, well, then they might just say goodbye to him, because you know what, he would be past his prime at the time he goes to free agency.
Correct. But if they trade deGrom, it would be very difficult to find something in equal compensation.
I didn't say trade him, but keep him until he becomes a free agent and let him walk.
Let him walk and then get nothing for him after all these years.
Well, you know what? You have 2 more years of him as a top line starter, and then as we're seeing, a guy who's had a couple of arm surgeries. Mm-hmm. He's at the top of the market at 32 years old. These guys go on a decline since then. We're seeing it with Clayton Kershaw, who's the best pitcher in baseball for 5 years. I don't think he opts out, because if he opts out, if I'm Brian Cashman, I'm on the phone with him tomorrow. But if he opts out, will he get the type of money that he has, the $65 million over the next couple of years?
Very unlikely.
Probably not. So, but that's more for the off season. So right now, let's wrap it up. This is Joe McDonald for Andy Esposito on the Pro Baseball Central podcast, and we'll be back with you next time during the off season.